Welcome to the Aquest Podcast, conversations about regs, funds, and governance with your host, Daniel Lawler.
Hello and welcome to the Aquest Podcast, the easy listening funds industry podcast. My name is Danny Lawler and I am one of your co-hosts for this episode of the Aquest Podcast. And for this edition, we have taken to the road and gone to London. The audio for this podcast was recorded just after the Dublin Calling event, which was a Brexit breakfast briefing co-hosted by Aquest and Savvi Recruitment Consultants. At the event, we spoke very little about Brexit actually, but really wanted to give some insights on what firms can expect if they relocate to Ireland in terms of what the regulatory market is like and what the recruitment market is like. So we were joined at the event by Katie Thurston of IDA Ireland. She's based in London. She's the head of financial services. She gave some insights into the kinds of conversations she's having with firms at the moment that are looking at Ireland as their Brexit solution. And she was able to give some colour as to what the kind of questions she's getting from those firms and the sorts of items of interest that they're really picking up on. So, for example, the fact that there's actually quite a large international population in a lot of firms that are based in Ireland in financial services. We also had Jennifer Cahill of Savvi Recruitment Consultants, my co-host for the event, and she spoke about the recruitment market in Ireland. So what firms can expect in terms of trying to recruit staff in should they decide to relocate to Ireland. She spoke about the sort of talent that's available, and she gave some really great tips on how individual firms can distinguish themselves in a market that's quite competitive in trying to get the right candidates for roles. Finally, then I spoke about the regulatory environment in Ireland, spoke a little bit about how the regulator goes about doing its job and what its mandate is, just pointed out some of the international engagement that the regulator is involved in as really a means of building connections with other regulators in light of the fact that one of our big allies, the UK, will shortly be away from the European table. So after the event, I spoke to firstly Garret Sheridan of Rothschilds, then to Katie Thurston, as I said, of IDA Ireland, and finally to Jennifer. And those conversations are captured here in this podcast. They give their feedback on the event, and hopefully from that you get a flavour for what went on in the morning and an idea of the sorts of topics that were of interest to people at the time. My thanks to Garret, Katie and Jennifer for participating and co-hosting on the podcast, and I really hope you enjoy it. Hi, so I'm here with Garret Sheridan, who has just attended the Dublin Calling event in the lovely Rosewood Hotel in London. Garret, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm responsible for operational due diligence at Rothschild Capital Management. We run a number of pools of capital, an investment trust, and effectively family office pools of capital. So permanent capital base allocated to many strategies across private equity, hedge funds, long only funds, and also direct in private equity and the public markets.
Great. And so obviously we were just out of the Brexit event this morning. Anything that you picked up from that you were surprised by or you didn't really know or appreciate beforehand?
Well, it was very interesting to hear from the entire panel to understand actually that the inward calls from the UK to Dublin. So we have the IDA here, and they actually give real colour on the actual conversations they're having with some of their clients, some of their UK-based potential clients who are actually looking to move to Dublin. So for me, it gave me real colour of actual real conversations that are occurring, rather than reading headlines in newspapers where you see thousands of jobs moving over to Dublin where in actual fact they're just headline figures. But we can see across the board, and not just within Dublin, also in regional towns as well, which I thought was very important.
I wonder sometimes if that sort of gets lost. It looks like headlines, but behind that, the reality is these are real jobs moving outside the UK to other jurisdictions.
Absolutely, I would give very little weight to most of the headlines I do read with respect to those, because they're just headline grabbing and pure managed articles. But here today, for sure, there was some real flavour there.
And it is a real thing. You know, that the guys in IDA are quite busy meeting these firms and just helping them with the process of understanding where to locate, what the market is like, how they interact with the regulator, that kind of stuff. So
yes.
It is really happening.
Absolutely, it's really happening. But that point about talking to the regulator and managing that relationship. not only from my perspective is it interesting for me to see that from an Irish perspective and the CBI, but also when I look at managers in the UK and the difficulties that they do have sometimes because of bottlenecks within the different regulators, and it's also similar in Asia where I just came back from those types of conversations. They are limiting factors, and the bottlenecks create problems for ultimately the allocators at the end of the day. Which is something I focus on very intently when we're talking to startup managers or managers relocating to new jurisdictions. So it was very interesting to hear today that while the Irish regulator is very balanced, but they are very open to constructive discussions and meeting expected timelines.
Yeah, they will do. They'll certainly engage and be transparent and let people know what to expect in terms of authorization, supervision processes and what have you. But that's the reality of Brexit 5 months out. You know, these applications coming through, these firms looking to relocate and jobs moving across and what have you. Thank you very much for your time, Garret.
Pleasure. Danny, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm here with Katie Thurston of IDA Ireland, who's the financial services head here in London. She's just been with us at Dublin Calling and participated with introductory remarks and on the panel discussion. I just want to get your views, Katie, on how you felt the event went. Was there sort of questions there that you were asked that are new than what you got before? Or?
Well, generally I thought it was a really excellent event, particularly actually I think your talk in relation to financial regulation, but like I'd never.
You're promoting me, but I'll take it.
I'd actually never heard it done that way before. I mean, you know, a lot of the events that I've been to in the past talked about it from a very legalistic standpoint, but you spoke about like the culture of the regulator, the background, the fact that they don't have that competition mandate. I thought that was really useful, so I thought that was a good part. I thought there were a couple of people who were frantically taking notes, so I was happy to see that too. I thought between the three of us it was nice because there was three very different perspectives from the financial regulation, from the recruitment, and then obviously I spoke a little bit about how IDA can help clients as well on the ground.
Not too technical.
No, not too technical, which was good. Delighted to be part of the event today, and I think we gave some new information to people as well that they might not have already heard.
And I think what it helped with some people was just to understand this is really happening. You're having real conversations with firms, and they're looking at Dublin or they're looking at Cork, and these are, you know, they're recruiting and they're applying for authorization. So it's a very real process. It
is, and what I've been surprised at is, so I suppose I've been here in London for the last 4 or 5 weeks. I've had about 20 plus meetings with firms who are either establishing in Ireland, thinking about establishing in Ireland. So they're kind of going through that process, and it's interesting. Some companies have not actually pulled the trigger in terms of submitting an application yet. But what I strongly feel as well is that, you know, I mean, companies have to think about the long term, so where they want to be after this. So post-Brexit, I think all of us in a way, we're just thinking about that March deadline. We have to think about beyond that, particularly from the company's perspective. Where do you want to be located? Do you want to be, you know, in an Ireland which has a proven track record, you know, all of the advantages from a tax and talent and technology standpoint, you know, where you've got a substantial financial services industry, or do you want to be somewhere maybe you could get an application in a shorter time period, but then somewhere that does not have that track record and
life
that
goes
stability.
On after the 29th
Life goes
of
on,
March.
exactly. And I think with Ireland you see consistency of policy, you see stability, and you see all of those advantages that have been in here before Brexit, during this period and after. So.
Yeah, and I think you see a lot of credibility in the message by the regulator. They're not promoting, but they are clear and transparent about how they do their job.
Exactly, and I suppose the feedback that we've been getting as well is that we've always been able to organise meetings with the central bank, you know, very short, within a very short time period, and they have been very open. They've been very receptive. So I think those are all positives, you know.
Good. I know you're rushing away, so one last question. What's the number one question you get asked by firms or financial services businesses when you meet them and they're thinking about Ireland?
The number one question, well, at the moment it's all around the regulation, the piece around regulation. But I mean, when that goes away, it's about the talent piece, right. You know. So where can I find the talent, etc., etc. So that could be the next.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time on this, and thank you for attending today.
Thank you.
So I'm here with Jennifer Cahill of Savvi Recruitment Consultants. We've just finished Dublin Calling. The crowd is gone. The background noise has dropped a little bit. And I just want to get your thoughts, Jennifer, on the event, how it went, what kind of questions you got during the event and afterwards, and your feedback on how it went.
Yeah, so thanks, Danny. It went really well. Very positive feedback. I think what people were very pleasantly surprised in terms of the recruitment side of things was, firstly, a very international workforce in Ireland, that we could, that there is available sort of international language skills, and that we do have a pretty diverse workforce, not just Irish or Irish returning. The other thing that people mentioned is I touched on kind of soft benefits like flexibility, ability maybe to work part-time or work from home, and how that's a really important benefit for people when considering making a move, particularly if they have flexibility at the moment. So actually that resonated with a lot of people that I spoke to afterwards, and they spoke of how they're actually trying to do that here in London within their firms, because they recognise that that's an issue, and that it's something that people are just more and more looking for, and they're having to react to that demand. So it's just nice to see that that is the reality within firms, that they are reacting to it, and they are very much keen to obviously replicate that when they come to Dublin. So I think that was something actually a good few people had said to me.
Another thing that I thought was interesting in your presentation was around the talent that's available. It might not be directly the exact match that what you were looking for, but if you look slightly outside that, you've got lawyers with lots of experience, you've got people from a depository background or even an administrative background, that kind of stuff, that can step in, for example, and train up and do a designated person role or some sort of an operating role or a management role.
Yeah, no, and definitely, and I think it's just because there isn't necessarily, in asset management particularly, there isn't the mirror image, or there isn't the volume of people who have that direct risk and compliance experience. It is just thinking a little bit different. It is looking slightly outside the box, but I wouldn't say it's a million miles away. There's still people who know the funds industry inside out. They know all the players in it. They know how it works from an operations perspective, and then they have the regulatory knowledge. So it's just slightly different. It's just the makeup of our workforce, and that's been driven by the firms and the type of work that's been there for the last 30 years. So even though you're not maybe getting the mirror image, it doesn't mean that that's an inferior hire to what you have in London. It's just different, and I would say it's probably going to enrich your team in London if they're working with them and they're coming from a different perspective, and they have a lot of operational experience. They can really bring that to bear in the role as compliance or risk officer.
As been managing those expectations amongst the hiring firm to understand, it might not be exactly that, but it'll be a good fit notwithstanding.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think on the side I was covering, so the regulatory side, I've got a lot of questions just about, or a lot of feedback just around understanding more about the regulator's mandate and the fact that they're not out there wearing the green jersey and rolling out the red carpet. But that doesn't mean that they aren't going to meet with firms, that they're very transparent, very clear about what firms should expect of them, and they follow through on it. That is what happens in reality. And I think it's interesting to know that kind of stuff, and you might not necessarily pick up on that from the outside. And even the things like I spoke a bit about the international engagement that the regulator's involved in. Part of their vision is to be respected by their peers, and that means, in practical terms, getting on a lot of planes and doing a lot of bridge building with regulators in other jurisdictions. And you see how involved they are at senior levels in ESMA in terms of being on the management board and the ESRB and so from the outside you wouldn't have any reason really to pick up on that, but when it's pointed out to you, you'll spot that in the future, and you see that the regulator is quite active in being respected by its peers, building its profile and its network of connections to make sure that it's in a good place of having those those contacts and those arrangements in place and those relationships in place going into the future when we don't have the UK as an ally around the European table, which is going to be a big change.
As you said, it's knowing what to expect and getting exactly that gives people assurance. It is that clarity when among what is a lot of uncertainty around the bigger picture on Brexit and what's going to happen. And we see that from clients. They like that there is a lot of clarity, there's a lot of transparency in dealing with the central bank, as long as they're transparent and they're openly communicating with them, and they've got a very set plan in terms of what they want to do in Ireland. They're getting the good they're getting feedback, they're getting interaction and communication and quite good clarity from the central bank, and that's what they want. Every business wants clarity. They want to know what to expect, and the central bank is doing that.
The last thing I'd say then is we did, although the event is called Dublin Calling, we did reach outside the pale, and we looked at Cork in particular, and other centres around Ireland where they're seeing a lot of growth in financial services, and it's quite attractive for firms to go there and to locate depending on what it is that they're looking to do. So it's interesting that it's not a Dublin centric event. It's much broader than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a lot of firms, and not only Cork but in Limerick, and I know Katie had mentioned Nina, which a little bit more obscure, but there is starting to be a bit of a hub down there in terms of international companies. And then there's a lot of people in Dublin that are not from Dublin that actually would love the opportunity.
Love to go back to Kilkenny or Cork.
Yeah, or wherever it is. So there is that appetite there in Dublin among people that are very experienced professionals. So again, I think as Katie mentioned, there might be certain businesses for certain requirements, they need to be close to their advisors or the central bank or whatever it is. But if that's not the case, then absolutely the regional parts of the country, Limerick, Cork, Kilkenny and others, absolutely worth considering.
Great. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your co-hosting.
Thank you,
Daniel, and your presenting.
Likewise,
and thank you to Katie as well. She did a terrific job. Great insights from her. Thank you to Rosewood London, a beautiful hotel.
Very nice.
There is a Ferrari parked outside the front. I'm going to go and hop in it and speed away.
Yeah, you wish, Danny.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a million.
You've been listening to the Aquest Podcast. For information about our training and advisory programs or our academy, visit aquest.ie. For more resources on regs, funds, and governance, check out our YouTube channel, Daniel Lawler, RU, RQ.